this will be valuable, and I hope you can put up with this. I'm not going to talk that long this morning. But I'm going to talk to you about the decline of family and the rise of gangs and the relationship between those two phenomena, the decline of family and the rise of gangs. Now, there have been a lot of people in my area who have written brochures about gangs, and they have all of the terminology and all of the faddish themes about gangs and what have you. And as if the gang phenomena is something new, and they ask the teachers to go to workshops about gangs and stuff. Well, I haven't gone to any gang workshops. None whatsoever. Because, you see, I'm one of these persons who have not been sold out to the New Age movement and the newness of society. I haven't sold out to that. I am convinced that human beings are basically the same today as they were when God created them. They operate on the same basic impulses, move on the same basic instincts, and are driven by the same basic drives they were 2,000 years ago. This is not a new creature we are dealing with. I was lecturing in Mississippi not too long ago, and a man told me, he said, Mr. Jenkins, that you know, the children are different today. And I reminded him, or informed him, that I had just eaten some sweet potato pie at my mother's house. And the sweet potato pie tasted the same as it did when I was a teenager. And I said, does that sound strange to you? He said, no, not really. Your mother's still cooking it. I said, yeah. And she's still using the same ingredients. And because she's still using the same ingredients and following the same basic instructions, the pie tastes the same. Now, how do children change? I have a nephew that lives in the house with my mother. He has always lived there. He's about 15. My nephew lives by the same rules that I lived by when I was growing up in my mama's house. My mother was very successful in rearing 11 children, 8 boys, and none of them are in jail, at least unless they went last night. They haven't been able to get in touch with me. None are on drugs that we know anything about, and none are making money doing anything crooked or illegal. Now that's not anything worthwhile, what I've just told you, because we don't define our lives on the negative. Now, I think we ought to stop defining, well, my child's not on drugs, he's not in jail, as if that's something. That's a sad state when we can define progress by the lack of regression. But that's not what the thing about my mother's accomplishment with rearing her children. They are all doing progressive, productive things, and they are all members of the church family. And by those rules, we were reared, and my little nephew, Champ, we call him, is being reared by the very same ones, and he's acting. Now, I remember a year or so ago, 2 years ago, I was at my mother's house, and my sister, one of my sisters, was talking to Champ, and he said something, and his voice was a little louder than she thought it should be, and she just looked at him. That same look that I got when I said something out of line. And his response to that look was the same as mine. Lower that voice. You're not grown yet. Now, so where do we get into this game stuff? Are these new children here? Well, they are, but they were allowed to become so. Now, what do children need? What did children used to need when we knew how to rear them? What did they need back then? Well, children need to belong. Isaac Hayes, for those of us who are old that used to listen to that kind of music, I listen to it, now when I'm looking for the gospel station. And some people, I'm traveling, and we don't know where the gospel stations are. On the way to the gospel stations, it's on there. And you have to listen to it sometimes, so the gospel song may come on next. But Isaac Hayes used to say this song, I need to belong to someone. A man hates to be known as no one. Now, I better not say any more out of the song, because you say, well, he listened to an awful long time. You should know all of that. But everybody needs to belong. And everybody actually needs a game. Everybody needs a game. Now, I told you my mother had 11 children, so we had a built-in game. Like you said, that was the same with them gang of children. So we need to belong. We get lonely if we are separated from our gang. And so there's nothing wrong with being a member of a gang. That's why I told the young man to stay. This is about young folks. There's nothing wrong with belonging to a gang. That young man back there that works with me belongs to a gang. A fraternity. How many of you belong to fraternities? Well, if you have been a member of a fraternity, that's a gang. Now, Jesus had a gang. Really? 12 of them. He called them disciples. That was a gang, a group. Now, if they're nice people that you like, you call them a group, a club, an organization. But if you don't like them, you call them a gang. Just like when Jesse James did stuff, it's Jesse James' gang. But when the folks organized to go and catch them, it was a posse. So what you call them sometimes determined by what they're doing and how you feel about them. So people need to belong. We all need to belong. I belong to the church. Now, I'm not much of a joiner. I wouldn't join a fraternity when I was in college. They got mad with me about that. I'm not much of a joiner. I joined the church when I was a child. And since I joined the church, I haven't joined much else. I belong to the Kiwanis Club in Missouri, St. Louis, but I don't join that much else. And then here's the reason I don't join anything. I had a student years ago, a young man named Chris, and he joined some organization, wants to have all the secrets and stuff. And he's the youngest person in the history of it. And he told me, you ought to join. I said, well, I'm not going to join anything. So he finally joined it, and he'd come over to the the house and said, oh, you ought to be a part of it. I said, why, Chris? Why do you think I ought to join? He said, because all that stuff you talk about, they talk about it too. He said, the things that you do, they talk about it. He said that you help people, they talk about those kind of stuff like that. You do what's right, they talk about that. So you want to join? I said, now look, where do you think I got all of this stuff from in the first place? All the stuff that they said, he said, it's kind of like the church. I said, well, see, I belong to the church. I don't have to go in to get anything kind of like the church. Why would I leave the church, Reverend, and go and join something kind of like the church? If I want to do it, I'll do it through the church. Now, you're not, your church not doing anything, you want to find extra stuff, that's fine. But everything that we said, I don't know one good organization that is doing anything good that some church, and even in Omaha, is not doing. Now, I'm not discouraging membership in these other organizations. They're fine organizations. But you do what you're told to do in the church, you wouldn't have time for all this stuff. But that's another lecture. Now, it's all right that you want to just work yourself extra, but the church calls us to do all of those things that the organizations are doing. And sometimes when the organizations flourish, it simply means that the church is not doing its job. That's all it means. Because if the church was working you hard enough, you wouldn't have time for all this other stuff. You remember my church, you wouldn't have time for anything. I said, okay, brother, you want to help young people? All right, come on. We got the young people at the church. You want to coach basketball? Fine. Let's get out of the team right here at the church. Whatever you want to do, I've got some young folk that you can do it with. And if I don't have them in the church, let's go out here in this community. We'll find some out there. Whatever you want to do that's good, we'll find somebody in the church that you can do it. In your own family now. So people need to belong. Children need to belong. They always have and they always will. Families need to belong. Older people need to belong. Now, as a family, you ought to make people belong. You ought to let people belong. And one of the things that I did when I was pastoring up in Columbia, Missouri, all the young people in our church, you know, we have this problem with young folk that by the time they get to be 15, 16 years old, this is in Missouri, that by the time they get to be 15, 16 years old, they start leaving. They don't do that here, because I know, but in Missouri, they're trying to get 15, 16 years old, they start leaving because you don't relate to them anymore, you know. They've outgrown the little program downstairs and that kind of stuff, and they just move on, leave. Well, our kids didn't do that. I go to the house through the week. They want to play football. I was right out there in the middle of the street with them playing football. I went to see their games, and there wasn't a service that went by that I did not say something about what they were doing. I involved them in the service. I would make them read the scriptures for me. I make them make a couple of meditations and all kinds of. They were there every Sunday. I had something for them to do. Because now they didn't understand all of my sermons, maybe, but they were certainly there. I may not have understood all the plays they ran on the football field, but I was there. They needed to belong, and we, children, need to belong. So, well, I thought we were talking about games. We are. We're talking about games the way the church folk know how to talk about them. And the only way church folks need to talk about them. You don't need to run out and learn all this stupid language of the kids. Teach them the language of the church. Okay? So we children need to belong. And it's a sad thing when children don't feel that they belong to their families. And it's not just poor children that sometimes feel that they don't belong to their family. Some of these middle class folk, so busy working 2 jobs, and the children are fixing fixing TV dinners for themselves while you are out pursuing your second career. They don't know where they belong. Children need to belong. And stop this lie about quality time. Oh, he said, this man is really going for it. No such thing as quality time that you can arrange. You see, quality time does come, but it is unannounced, unscheduled. You just got to be there sometimes 10 hours to get 2 quality minutes in. You all say, okay, we're going to talk today. Sit down, boy. We're going to talk. And he sits across the table with his mouth stuck out. And now look, I got to go to work. 3 o'clock, we better talk. About what? What are all the things on your mind? I don't want to talk. And then, well, we'll talk about it tomorrow. We'll reschedule some quality time tomorrow and talk about it. And you go out to work. You don't want to talk. Then, Ruth Peel, the wife of the late Reverend Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, said that one of her sons, that her husband was, Norman Vincent Peale was always traveling, and she said that her son had been talking to her about a lot of his problems and stuff. And there comes a time when boys need to talk to their daddies. And so she said that one night, Norman had been somewhere lecturing, and he came in late and went to bed. Said he was so tired. And said after about 30 minutes after he got to sleep, the son came in. And he said, I need to talk to my dad. And she said, well, I said, no, John, I'll talk to you. He said, no, I need to talk to my dad. She said, well, your daddy is asleep. He said, wake him up. And we just got in off the trigger. You know, he's tired. You got to get up in the morning. He said, I want to talk to my dad. She said, she went in. She said, she can do it. She said, Mama, John wants to talk to you. She said, let him go. Said he went in and talked to her dad and said she thought that the daddy would be kind of upset that she woke him. So the next morning, Norman said to her, said, I want to thank you for waking me last night. Said, John and I talked. Said he needed to talk. And I'm glad that I was here. Whenever you want to talk, stop me. Whatever I'm doing, just stop. That's quality time. You just have to be there. You know, you talk. You know, I had a kid I worked with him years ago. He used to travel with me. I would talk to him. He had some bad habits. He used to steal. And one day we stopped at the store. He went in there and stole something, and stole a book that was entitled Steal This Book. And he took it literally and stole the book. So I said to him, when he got back, he had to put on his coat, he sat in the car, and I traveled all over the country with this kid. I let him go with me. I was working in the civil rights movement, and he loved to work with me go. And so I let him go. And we talked all the way to Ohio and back. We talked, and I tell him all the right rules about stopping. Well, that day, he came out of the book, and I said to him, Darryl, would you bet $1,000 against the dime? I don't know where I got that from. He said, what do you mean? I said, just that, but you can bet $1,000 against the dime. He said, well, explain that. I said, well, it doesn't mean anything. You see, some things are so clear that people need to explain it. It can't be that clear. Explain it. I said, well, let me show you. If I had a dime and you had $1,000, would you bet me your $1,000 against the dime? He said, let's get this straight. If you win, you get my $1,000, and if I win, I get your dime. I said, you got it. He said, well, that would be crazy. I said, you wouldn't do that? He said, no. I said, well, that's interesting. I said, how much you think your life is worth? So what do you mean? I said, your future. How much you think your future is worth? I said, I don't know. I said, well, just put a figure on it. I said, suppose you work now the rest of your life. How much is it worth? All that future that's out there, how much is it worth? He said, I don't know. I said, let's put $1 million price tag on it. You look like you may be worth $1 million at some point. He said, what about $1 million? He said, okay, my future is worth $1 million. I said, okay, how much does that book cost? I reached down and got it and had a good price tag on there, 95 cents. I said, okay, you have just bet $1 million future on a 95 cents item. I put the book down and started my car and drove. I never had enough conversation with a kid about that. 2 years later, he came to visit me when I had moved out of Mississippi. I just wanted to talk. He stayed a whole week. When he got ready to go, he said, I want to thank you. I said, but what? He said, you know, all the talking that we used to do. He said, I'll tell you when you turn me around. He said, that day you told me about the $1,000 and the dime. He said, of all those lectures that I heard you do, all those conversations, it came together that day. That man was teaching school down in Mississippi. So quality time, it cannot be arranged. You just have to be there. And they can show kids that they belong. Now, if you can't be there, don't go away feeling guilty. You're doing what you have to do. You got to choose between them eating and feeling belonged, I guess. Okay, and children need to be nurtured, and it takes time to nurture them. They need to belong, and they need to be nurtured. And we've forgotten how to nurture. Well, you know, oh, she's just a little grown child. She's just 9 years old. She's just as grown as she can be. Children need to be nurtured. Now, what does nurturing mean? Not nursing, nurturing. They need to be looked after as if they are children. They need to be led and taught and checked on and monitored. All of those things are part of the nurturing process. And children need that. They need to be nurtured. And there are many people who do not have the time to nurture. And they have turned that responsibility over to school teachers. I have many students who tell me, parents who tell me, Mr. Jenkins, you have more influence on my child than I do. I told a woman one day, I was talking to her about her son, and I said, you know, he's very unhappy. She said, how did you know that? I said, well, he sits in my class every day on the front row. I can tell an unhappy kid when I see one. Well, she said, well, we only knew it. The boy had just attempted suicide. So she said she didn't know it until then. Well, I knew it. You know, I'd take the kids outside the door several occasions and talk to them because I knew they weren't happy. Took one girl out of the room, and I said, now, tell me what's wrong. I said, okay, you just burst out and cried and died, nothing. Then she just broke down. Told me her mother and father were in the process of getting divorced. She had handled it well at that point, but that day it just got to them. Children need to be nurtured. And children need to be led. They need to be led. Children do not know anything about this life. And you know, I teach 15 and 16-year-olds, and they turn 16 for the third time they're in my class. And there's nothing that is more, well, no one knows more about life than a 16-year-old. I tell them, why don't you run away and take care of yourself while you know everything? And they will stand up, you know, they just stand up and say, yeah, Mr. Jenkins, I know that. Now, how long you been here? I'll turn 16 next week. And I have some of the children there, well, my mama can't tell me nothing. And I said, well, honey, let me tell you what you're saying. And usually girls tell me that, but mama can't tell me nothing. I said, now, that's a terrible indictment against you and your mother. now, your mother has been in the world. I said, just say she's just 32. You're 16. And I just say that she's 32. If she's been in the world twice as long as you have, well, twice as long as you have, and she doesn't know any more than you know, she's an awful dumb woman. I wouldn't go around telling anybody that my mama was that dumb. That she's been in the world twice as long as I have and doesn't know any more than I know. And I said, and then when folks find out how little you know, they're going to go and lock this woman up. She says, I have to talk to kids because kids really don't realize how stupid some of the stuff they say sounds. So they need to be led. Now, children also, in addition to being led, children need to be restrained. They need to be restrained. There is one thing, and I tell this often to my students, there is a difference between sense and strength. It's one thing to have sense enough to know what's right, and another thing to have strength enough to do it. Now, I'm going to say that again. It is one thing to have sense enough to know what is right, and something different to have strength enough to do it. Now, I can tell you that most of you knew, grown folks, most of you knew the last time you sinned, you knew when you were doing it, it was a sin. Now, were you just arrogant and didn't care? Or you just was weak? And when you were young, remember now, you're not as much in control of your emotions as you later become. So don't leave these young people. I remember the other day and said my secretary, she was in the office discussing with another teacher about her daughter. And I wasn't a part of the conversation, but being a preacher, you get into conversations that you're not necessarily invited into. So they were talking about the daughter. She said, well, my daughter wants to have a friend over while we are out of town. Okay, he's a nice boy, and I was just wondering whether it's all right. So the other lady whose daughter bosses her around and has taken over her life, she said, well, I'll see if they grow with it. Well, her daughter, So, when the conversation quieted down, I said, well, I have something to say. I said, Mary Jo, don't you do it. He said, why not, Bill? I said, well, in the first place, there's a difference between sense and strength. He said, now, they have the best of intentions, but children ought to be monitored. And the other one said, well, I trust my daughter. I said, trust her to do what? Children need to be monitored because, and that they need to be monitored and restrained, because left to their own, children will do things that they later on will regret, and if you are not there to restrain them, they will blame you. Where were you when I was destroying my life? Now, I mean, I'm just standing over you with a baseball bat. That's where I'm going to be. Now, let's talk a little bit about games. Now, this is what a family ought to do. Now, when the family stops doing that, see, there's nothing new. See, I don't understand how we turn the country over to 12, 13, 14-year-old boys. See, that's what is happening here. The discussion, here you are going to Washington, going to the Capitol, going to congressmen, powerful congressmen, asking them to help you bring your children back into control. Now, what kind of people are we talking about here? Are these alien monsters who have some guns that cannot be stopped? the army. They've taken over the bodies of people and control the army. You know, a big country like this, we are held at bay. And when folks find out who it is that's keeping us from going out at night, they think you're crazy. So what's your biggest problem in this country? Well, crime. Who's causing most of your crime that you are afraid of? Teenagers who do not have jobs, do not have any great intellectual power, do not vote, do not own anything, do not have any clout in society, and you are having conferences discussing gangs. And the gangs consist of a bunch of powerless children. 95% of them are probably eating at the government's expense. And we, a civilized society, have problems with gangs. Now, we have a problem with gangs because Christian families or families have not done what they were supposed to do with their children. They have not properly given their children a sense of place. They have not nurtured them. They have not led them, and they have not restrained them. What's gangs called? By two basic needs that children have that gangs are called, that the gangs flourish on. One is the need to belong. Children need to belong. They feel a need to belong. And the gangs give them that. Two, they need to be restrained. You see, children need to know that there is a limit to the power they can exercise over other people. And when you give them, you see, power is kind of like a drug. A little bit of it, it messes up grown folk. You know, you got some deacons in churches that's supposed to have religion. I had a deacon tell me once in the church, oh, it'll go over my dead body. And I said, well, Reverend Deacon, the Lord and me would like that. See, you're not saying anything smart when you tell the preacher or the rest of the church a program will go over your dead body. A lot of church programs have gone over somebody's dead body. And if the Lord has to lay you out to let the church roll on, fine. I wouldn't tempt the Lord like that. Well, the church will move on my dead body. Did you know that Jesus said that upon this rock I'll build my church and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it? The gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And you think that you going to stop it and all the Lord has to do to let the church roll on is to have him roll you out of every casket? Oh my God. We about to run out of time, right? Now, so this thing about power will just really get people going. So here's a child, 12, 13 years old. You turn his life over to him. He needs to belong somewhere. And there are people telling him, you know, he's already taken over his house. See, now the first thing that you have to do, see, children graduate from one thing to the other one just as adults do. So if he bosses his little sister around when he's 9 and mother's gone all the time, then by the time he's 12, he's telling her what to do. Well, he thinks I'm ready for the streets now. Goes out there and he tells the other little people down on the corner, they're afraid of him too. Little folks lock their door when they see him passing by. Oh yeah, I got things under control now. Then he watches some TV shows. And you see all this foolishness in the TV where the bad black boys, they're running and suicide and folks scared of them. He sees all of that and he says, oh my God, America is a great place to be. And those wimps are afraid of us. We have this power. And they get on the TV and talk this mess about, let the police come down here. We ready for it. Now, really. But you see, that's how stupid young people can be. We can handle the police. Yes, you can handle the police. Now, you can, Saddam Hussein, with over 2 million troops, I think, 6 million, I believe they say he had. 6 million troops. And we took 1,500,000, took 500,000, and the other 500,000 was just on the way there to be landed. And in 24 hours, Saddam Hussein was crying, leave us alone. Oh, I'll leave Kuwait. Now, do you think a country that's strong enough to go that far and put Saddam Hussein in check really has to stand by and let 14 and 15-year-old black children take over the country? Now, don't be a fool. All you're doing is setting your children up to be wiped out like dogs. That's all you're doing. All you're doing with these gang fools is setting yourself up to be killed, slaughtered in the streets like dogs. This country is not long going to tolerate black children holding this country in hostage. And black middle class people need to stop taking up for the wrong of black people. Every time white people criticize them, one of these blacks on the TV, taking up for it. Get mad at me for one. I already had breath. Now, this gang mess needs to stop. And it will stop when we start insisting that families play the role of families. Now, the last thing I want to tell you about things is that it is not the group your children belong to. It's what they are when they join the group. You see, you remember the other night I told you that a family person, a family began with an individual, not with a group, not with two. It began with an individual. The individual, who is a God-fearing, God-loving individual, will attach himself or herself to persons who are like-minded, and they can start and develop a Christian family. Because they've already bought into the Christian ideals. That's what starts a Christian family, an individual with Christian ideals. Now, you ought to teach those ideals to the offspring, and the offspring ought to buy into those ideals, and whenever he comes across anything and anybody who do not share those ideas, he says, well, I'll see you all later. That's why I want that young man to stay. You've been taught Christian ideals. And whenever you come across anybody who does not have those ideas, you put some distance between them and you. Because your ideas are just as important as theirs. And your ideas have been the one that your parents have used and other folks have used throughout generations and been successful. And you don't have to give them up for any junk that anybody has. You don't have to turn your cap around sideways and pull your pants down to show that you relate to anybody. Because you already belong to a gang. Your family is a gang. The church is a gang. But your gang got some rules that keep you from being a member of any other gang that has rules that's different. See, I had to do certain things to get into this game that I belong to. I had to give up certain things. You used to have an expression in Mississippi when folks joined the church, some of those folks She said, I fell out with my sinful ways. That means that I have come to be an enemy of what I used to be. And then they used to say, things I used to do, I don't do them anymore. So you ought to teach your children. See, when I was a kid, I was taught certain things. Certain kinds of people stay away from, not drugs and that kind of stuff was not a problem. They had corn whiskey and stuff that made down in Mississippi. But one of the things that I was taught was that don't be around folks gambling. Because somebody's going to eventually lose enough money to get mad and accuse others of stealing it or cheating, and they're going to pull out a gun and start shooting. And once the trigger is pulled, the bullet doesn't care who it is. So whenever I saw anybody gambling and saw some money, I was gone. I don't fool around with folks using drugs. The police may come at any time, start shooting. I get away from that kind of stuff. And what you need to teach young people is that you have values. And make sure that any group you join up with have your values. And if they don't, you get away from them. Because as a Christian, you do not have time for that. You see, I got a sermon I did years ago called Name Brand Christians. You see, that my students know those brands that go on the clothes, they know that mine don't have them. So I'm just thinking, all money you make, you should wear such thing. I don't even know the names of the big name brand. See, once you're a Christian, Jesus has put his brand on you. And if his brand is on you, then you don't fit with a lot of this junk. There was this young man once that, I want y'all to big things at the time, but I started him anyway, so I can never Well, I didn't tell the story. A young man was in college, and his grandmother slipped up on him. They came to get him, but they used to just blow the horn. But this time, his grandmother came up to the room and knocked, and he opened the door, and there's grandmother was standing there. Well, that was no problem except for the fact that he had some women on the wall, pictures of them. And they were not necessarily, they weren't dressed like you ought to dress. As a matter of fact, they were not dressed at all. He was so embarrassed. And his grandmother, Christian woman, he had been brought up in a Christian home, and she didn't say his name. She said, "You ready?" Let me get my foot. So he waited for her to say something. They got back in the car. She didn't say a word. All the way home. She didn't say anything. When she found out, she said, "What do you think about my love?" She said, "Oh, it was wonderful." She said, "Your furniture and stuff is just like we picked it. Everything." She said, "Well, whatever." She said, So he said, "You didn't see those pictures?" She said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "What did you see?" She said, "Oh, that was some pretty women. Beautiful women." I said, "That's all?" She said, "I guess that's why you put them up there. They're pretty." She said, "They're pretty women." Well, he knew there was more to it than that. So when he got ready to go back to college, the grandmother says, "I want to go back up to your room with you." I said, "Okay." So she went up there, and she said, "I bought you another picture." "Oh, did you?" She said, "Yes." He said, "Now, this is pretty too." He said, "I want that doing all my life." And she said, "Where is it?" He said, "You got the space and all right up between these two." So she started there. There was a beautiful picture of Jesus. So she put it up there. And she said, "I hope you really enjoy all your pictures." And she left. But a month later, she came back to visit him. And went up to the room. And there was the wall bare. said, why are they such pretty women? See, yeah, they pretty all right, but they just shouldn't fit with Jesus. You teach your children that certain things don't fit with Jesus. Certain things don't fit with your family name. Certain things don't fit with this church's reputation. Not good to come here on a Sunday and listen to a Dr. McPherson and go out on Monday morning and curse our teachers. I've run out of time.
I want to thank Dr. Jenkins for his presentation this morning. Truly, I agree with him. Every time you hear him, you come from a different perspective, and he just say just the things that are helpful. And if nothing more is done or said, enough has been said that can help us to make a difference in this church, in our city, and in the world. So we want to thank you very much for our presentation. At this time,